Do babies matter? What a question. I think everyone in this room will certainly be positive on the answer with that one. But the question is, how do they matter, in what way, particularly in terms of women's careers over the long run, all the way from graduate school through retirement? And in 2000, I was appointed the graduate dean for the university. 10,000 graduate students. You're the biggest PhD pool in the world. Give more PhDs out at Berkeley than any other university. And I was very excited because Judy Suey, who was our data person, came in and she said, Dean Mason, you won't believe this, but there are more women than men in the entering graduate program this year. And I was very excited because I'm an old feminist of the 70s, and it was quite an imbalance in the 70s. And I thought, is the revolution over? We've won? And then I went to my first dean's meeting, and I was the only woman dean there. And that was true for about 3 or 4 years. Now there are some other women deans. So it took a long time to have this revolution, and we're not, let's see. Now, there has been, obviously, an incredible rise in women PhDs over the years. 1973 was about when I got my PhD, and only 50% were given to women. And now it's 2006, it's 50, now it's actually a little bit over 50%. Your field has always had a pretty good representation of women. In 1973, 30% of all the graduates who got PhDs in psychology were women. But now you're really up there, you're up to 71%. Now, is that reflected in your faculty? Are 71? No, that's always the case. That's the leak in the pipeline. Now, this is, to understand the problem a little bit better, this is a test, and whoever knows the answer either gets a cup of coffee or a bourbon, depending on your choice. This is University of California, Berkeley, and on the right-hand side you can see a kind of manly figure, just because of his shoulders and a big head, and on the left-hand side you can see a kind of curvy feminine figure. Let's start with the head. What do you think the head represents? This is on this campus, University of California, Berkeley. Pardon me?
Number of faculty.
Yeah, tenure track faculty, all faculty, yeah, 987. And for women, you can see it's much, much smaller, 325. So even though your department probably is better than many because you have a superabundance of PhDs, many departments don't, particularly in the sciences, and they have relatively few women faculty. Now, maybe the key most important part of this diagram is the neck here, that little thing. And for men, it's 130, and it's twice as much for women. What do you think that represents?
Adjunct, non-tenure track?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Lecturers and adjuncts, mainly lecturers at this university. As you can see, men are kind of slight in that characteristic. And then you have the big necked women. And as we'll see, this is the women who fall into the second tier. They don't lose or leave academia altogether, but they don't go into the main faculty track. And what about the body?
Students, PhD students?
No, that's not a bad guess, because the number is kind of equivalent to that, but it's not. Pardon? No. As you can see, there are many more at the bottom than there are at the top. These are your staff. The University of California, like most universities, has a ratio of maybe 3 times as many staff as it does faculty, because you have all the people in the labs, all the people in the residence halls, et cetera. And the men are predominantly more wide-shouldered because they get paid more. They're usually in more technical jobs, and the women are having problems in the hips there because they slide down to the service jobs, often the residence halls, et cetera, and don't really have. We don't. It's interesting at this university. We don't tend to think of the staff that often. We just talk about the faculty and students, but the staff is very much alive, and I'll talk a little bit more about staff in the future. But this is just part of it. So someone gave me the neck. Who was it? Okay, we'll have to talk later. Either a bourbon, as I said, or Starbucks. Why not both, right? We can live big. The first question we asked when we started our research in about 2002, we got a a series of very good grants from the Sloan Foundation. So I had a nice little team that worked for 10 years, actually they're still working on it, 12 years on this particular issues. What happens to men and women after they get their PhDs? And how does having babies affect tenure? We used as our main data set the survey of doctorate recipients, the SDR. Now all of you, how many people have PhDs in this room? Ah, I knew it. And how many of you then did fill it out, the little SED, before you graduated? We didn't let you go from this university if you didn't fill it out. So you become part of this great database of people who have doctorate degrees, over 160,000 people. That's gone from 1973 to the present. And every 2 years, they have a 10% group that they resurvey. And they're very, very hard about it. They won't let you get away. It's only if you die or leave the country or turn 78 that you can be out of the sample. Anyone in that sample, the ones who are surveyed every 2 years, you are?
They followed me up, followed up.
Okay, yes. They won't let you go, Tanya. You're in it for life. But as a result of it, we probably have the best longitudinal employment database in the country. No other group has such rich data. And that's allowed us to ask a lot of questions and be very precise about it because we have so much data to look into. Okay, so this is using some of this data. Who gets tenure? This is the humanities and social science PhDs. As you can see, we have the big-headed guys and the fairly small-headed women with early babies. The men have babies too. It's interesting to find that men with babies are slightly better than single men. But women with babies are not. They're always in the second tier more. So the women with babies here, 42% are in the second tier and 58% are in the tenure track. And for late or no babies, that late or no babies, usually late means there are no babies because not many babies are born after 40 and you don't get tenure until you're 40 or so. So that's almost always a childless group there. They do a whole lot better than women who have babies. And this is in science. We divide it up between science and social science. I think psychology gets counted as science because sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. It should for sure, but that's hard to know. Who gets it in science? Here you see even more of a split. The men are 77% and the women are 53% who have babies. And then the women without children are kind of in the middle. But again, you see the big neck there, the dropping down into the second tier of women who have babies. And they become often the Gypsy Scholars of the Year of the world. I was a Gypsy Scholar actually for 2 or 3 years when I first moved to California. I teach at 2 different places because there was no job for a whole one. And I kind of raced around the freeway a lot. And I did that rather than give up the profession entirely, but it was very unsatisfactory in between way. Some of those people will eventually get full-time jobs. I did, but a lot won't. Now here we talk about leaks in the academic pipeline. And you were just telling me, Tanya, or were you the one who was telling me that there's an article out from some graduate student that there is no more leaks in the pipeline, which I'd be very hard to believe, but we'll look at this. What you see here is that mothers are 28% less likely than women without babies to enter a tenure track position. That means that somewhere along the way, usually as graduate students, but most often as postdocs, they decide not to take the tenure track position. Whereas women who have no children, as you'll see in the next slide, actually do as well as men. And then in terms of getting tenure, women are 20% less likely than men to become associate professors. And women are 20% less likely than men to become full professors within a maximum of 16 years. So the whole pipeline is pretty obvious there. Even those who do good in the pipeline don't get tenure or don't get become a full professor at the same rate that women who don't have babies or men who do have babies. Okay, and here's another look at this. And this is for this is just for the sciences, and this is the thing I find most interesting about this is that single women without children do almost the same as married fathers in getting into the pipeline. But they also, that's the middle drip, they also leak out at achieving tenure. But they get those jobs at the same rate as men. Married mothers have trouble all the way entering and then again getting tenure. So it's a real pipeline drop for married mothers and a little different for single women. We studied the postdocs. Actually, over the years, we questioned all the faculty in the UC system twice, all the postdocs twice, and all the graduate students. And we asked them a lot of questions about their attitudes and family formation, et cetera. So we got our own, the 10 campuses here have a huge database that we developed in many surveys over the year. So this is actually one from the UC system. And the women who had children since becoming a postdoc, 41% of them decided they wanted to change their original goal away from becoming a research professor and do something else, whereas only 20% of the men did. And women had children previous to postdoc, 32% decided they wanted to leave, not continue in academia, and 19% for men. So this is where you see probably the biggest leak. It's the postdoc years. And that's because of the age of the mother usually. They're getting into their 30s and whatever. But it's a very drastic leak. And this is for graduate students. There aren't as many babies born to graduate students proportionally as there are to postdocs. It's not quite the time that they have babies. But you can see there.
I'm a mom. I'm a graduate student.
Okay. Any other graduate students who are moms here?
10% of UC Berkeley graduate students are parents.
Oh, is that high? That's great.
Or maybe higher.
Yeah. Higher for postdocs.
Yes.
Anyway, this is just a snapshot, and 46% of the women who became mothers wanted to go in the direction of being a research professor at the beginning. But then, as you can see in the next slide, that dropped off to only 11%. So huge, huge slide from 46% wanting to pursue that to 11%. And then the women went into business, government, other, or other academic, which is the lighter blue. Other academic can mean a lot of things. It could be teaching high schools, junior college, but it's not a research job. And for men, much less of an effect. 58% wanted to become research professors at the beginning, but when they had a baby, that number went down to 45%. So it's a huge leak for mothers and a smaller leak for fathers. So you get the picture. Babies make a difference, and particularly in the postdoc years. It also makes a difference for assistant professors because they're less likely to get tenure if they have a baby. And these are doctoral students. I want to have a family and have children, enjoy being mother and wife, which are close to impossible when one chooses academia. The clock is ticking and it does not stop for anything or anyone. That's very common of the women's responses. And for men, fed up with narrow-mindedness of supposedly intelligent people who are largely workaholic and expect others to be so as well. But we were talking about it before that I think a lot of the graduate students and postdocs look at the tenure track faculty with children and think, it's an impossible world. I can't possibly do that. But most of us who have led it didn't find it that bad. It's actually quite possible. Mothers often make their decisions earlier. Twice as many women than men are likely to change their career goal away from being a research professor when they have babies as postdocs. A high percentage of mothers slide into the second tier, the part-time adjunct and lecturer corps, the gypsy scholars of the university world. Now, we've done this data collection for several years, and we had a lot of published papers, a lot of things that were happening. But we decided to turn the question on its head and say, not what is the effect of babies on career, but what is the effect of career on family formation? In other words, are as many women likely to have children as men are? What's the pattern behind it? And this is the family status of all tenured faculty in the NSF database. Mothers married with children is only 44% compared with men married with children, 70%. And as you can see, mothers have, not mothers, but women have 26% are single without children, and only 11% of men are that way. Mothers without children, 19%, and married without children is 15%. So the major difference here is the married with children, huge discrepancy between men and women. We were talking earlier, and I think it was Allison was saying that the older faculty are very unlikely to have children, and that they're more at the junior level. So things are changing to some extent, but not entirely. And here is the tenured faculty in the sciences. Again, because there are so few women tenured faculty, there's just a little ball out there, kind of a moon, and the other is men. So married fathers, 73%, married mothers, 53%, with babies. Single fathers, a very tiny number there, and single for women is 8%. But again, the same thing is reflected in the earlier slide as well. Although the difference is different because the ratio is different. You have a many smaller group of married with no children, of women to men. The ratios are still the same. Women who achieve tenure are more than twice as likely than men who achieve tenure to be single 12 years out from PhD. This is always kind of, when I give it to a general audience, and there are a lot of students, they start to bring out the Kleenex. Sounds terrible. If married, women are significantly more likely than men to experience divorce or separation. And this is one of my favorite slides because you see the hiring date is that little brown thing there. And you can see that men who are blue have babies early and often, even through their early assistant professor years. And the big year is the 4 to 6 years, because that's where you turn in your tenure material. That's the biggest year for women in having children. And then you see at the very end, 20 or more years out from being hired, what's this? There's a blue boom, but no pink boom. It's a little shocking, don't you think? This is the second family. What are your next steps? What are your next steps? Once we have all this data organized, we were in a position to really push through some reforms. And there's no question that data speak. You can really do a lot when you have numbers behind you. So we went, first of all, to President Atkinson at the time of the system. We said, you know, you've got to do something. We have to be more family friendly. We're losing our women, et cetera. And he was very good. So he allowed us to do all the surveying that we mentioned and to push forth a lot of reforms. And partly the reforms showing that the women have this incredible second tier, which is the second shift, or the Hochschild second shift, that women with children in the faculty and the sciences work 43 hours as their second shift and 54 hours in work. And men with children work 28 hours, so they help out as well, and 56 hours on the job. Now, the women who don't have children, they work 62 hours on the job and 19 on the second shift, which means caretaking, or taking care of yourself, taking care of your cat, whatever. But the interesting part is that 62 hours is interesting because in all these groups, we find that single women without children work harder than anybody else in the university. I don't know why. The men without children don't do that much either. 59 hours as opposed to 62, and 18 hours spent on self issues and maybe the cat or dog. Now those are postdoctoral scholars. You see, most postdocs are even worse. The mothers have 52 hours on their second shift and 43 hours on their job. Being a postdoc is definitely hard. I can say that confidently because I've been one, seen one, growing one right now. My own daughter's a postdoc, because you don't have as much money as you need for childcare, and that's one of the main reasons. So it's a time of great stress, and you clearly are not getting much relief from the second shift. So we thought of, over the years, we put together a lot of best practices, which included child care, part-time tenure clock, stop the clock, leaves, dual career. We'll go through each of them just a little bit. In terms of child care, no one in this country, any university has enough child care. It's just a phenomenon that never will be solved entirely. We do better than many because we do have a number of child care centers, and we do have subsidized child care, and we do have emergency child care. Has anyone taken advantage of the emergency? Okay, what'd you use it for?
Just coming to campus at the same time as my husband when we were taking care of our kid with no primary child care other than us.
Okay, so you did have to use it sometime. And how about you, Tanya? Did you use it?
I think it was during breaks in my regular childcare
Yeah.
where I still needed to be working.
Yeah, okay. So that seems to be very popular and is working out well. And it's not that expensive either. The universities, once they get the notion that it's not going to kill them, they usually are pretty good about doing it. We also have a part-time pre- and post-tenure clock. Did you faculty know that? That you can go part-time? It's little known, but it's true. It's in the academic handbook. And the reason for that is that in our survey, we surveyed the whole faculty, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, not just for mothers, but for men who often wanted to start up a company on the side or something like that, and then for phasing out retirement so they could actually just do less when they're older. So we're probably one of the only universities that actually has it as a policy. So if you ever want to go part-time, it's in the APM, and it's, yes?
Does that mean that, say, 2 years would count as 1 year towards your tenure clock if you're part-time?
If you're part-time?
Yeah.
What in terms of part-time, if you're assistant professor and you're going part-time, you have to eventually put together the case for being a regular faculty member. So if it takes you longer to do it, okay, but it's the same case. You don't expect more of you because you've been part-time. That's even stop the clock for tenure. The interesting part is we had a lot of these things on the UC books. President Gardner, many years ago, I think in the 80s, put some very progressive policies in place, including stop the clock for tenure, a year off. But we found that people weren't using it at all. And when asked, they say either I didn't know it existed, it's like the part-time that we're talking about here, I didn't know it existed, or I can't do it because I will look like I'm not a strong player and I'll be marginalized in the department. So, yeah.
I had the sense that we have an optional stop the clock at NYU, and I had the sense that people didn't recommend taking it because then they would just expect to see 7 years worth of record instead of 6 years worth of record if I went up after.
Yes, yes.
So even though I had 2 children pre-tenure, they were like, nah, just go.
So you didn't take it then?
I didn't take the
Okay.
So I could have delayed like 2 additional
Yeah.
years. So that would have been 8 years.
Yeah.
They were like, but then you need 8 years worth of the same level of productivity instead of 6.
Yeah.
So I was like, I better do it now when I can coach from those first 3
Right.
years before I did that.
Well, here it's set up so that it doesn't count against you in that regard.
But it's not supposed to. It's in the people's perception.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, right. So that the policy
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that you should be, evaluated based on 6 years,
Yeah.
but you've had 7 because you had a baby. But the sense was that people didn't actually treat it that way. I wonder if that's common.
Yes, but what's happened, I'll talk a little bit more about it. We've also promoted this for fathers and not just for mothers.
Yeah, no, that was true. Yeah.
Particularly the part-time tenure clock. And the leaves. Now, leaves, I think, is the most popular thing we changed. For mothers, you get 2 semesters off without teaching, full pay. Did anyone take advantage of that? And for fathers, they have 1 semester off. And they've been taking advantage. I've been really interested in the law school. There was sort of a baby boomlet there for a while, and mothers and fathers would be spending their time in the hallway discussing childcare issues. It had really changed the whole culture in a hurry. And it made it possible that women wouldn't feel they were going to get strikes against them by doing it. They would feel very comfortable in doing it. Now, the dual career, how many of you are dual career? The 2-body problem. Did you get any help at Berkeley for this? No? No one made any effort to find a job for your spouse or for you or whatever?
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but we have put in less effort in this than most universities have. And it's probably because we have a shrinking faculty, not a growing faculty as well. We're not likely to at a new faculty, new university that's just starting out. But dual career is one of the major reasons why. Usually there's a trailing spouse, and usually it's the woman who gives it up, so gives up the good job. So we've got to do a better job with that. Now, leaves are important. I just talked about the 1 year off for mothers and half a year for fathers. And accommodation is also, so it's not on here, but accommodation means that when you come back for leave or you have other kinds of issues, you should be accommodated to try to return to the place that you were in terms of your projects and work, et cetera, and not be penalized for it at all. And that isn't always the case. Okay, here we go. This is what we did for graduate students, for parents. Student parent grant. Anybody get the student parent grant? $15,000 just for having children? No.
You have to be making like less than $40,000.
That's true.
As a family
That's
to be getting it.
I know, that's the stinger. Yes. Stop the clock for 1 year for both mothers and fathers. 6-week paid maternity leave for GSIs and GSRs. Subsidized childcare, family housing, emergency childcare. The 6-week paid maternity leaves for GSIs and GSRs. Bob Bergeneau, if you remember him, he was the chancellor here for several years. And he was a great supporter of women in science, he really was. He was the author of one of their books, Beyond the Bias, that looked at the problem very, very carefully. And so I'm not a mathematician. I can hardly, or I shouldn't say I can hardly count, but I don't have great computational skills. But on the back of a napkin, I figured out how much it would cost to 6 weeks for either a GSI or GSR. And since they aren't paid that much money, and 6 weeks isn't that long, and there aren't that many who are having one every year, the numbers came out, and I said, Bob, this is the most you'd have to pay if you centrally funded this every year. And it was really something very low. It was $55,000 or something like that. And he said, oh, let's do it. It's just that easy. Other people fight a lot about the money, but this is kind of, that happens a lot with any of these changes. Everyone thinks they can't afford them, but they don't really do pencil and paper computation and figure out that they can possibly do them. And now that we've done that, Berkeley started it, and now the unions picked it up so that all the campuses now have this for maternity leave, and just maternity leave that we do not have. We don't have paid leave for fathers. We just have the other leave. Now you're going to see a little later on that recently we put a lot more protections in for graduate students, including graduate students' fathers, and this was done by a new bill. I'll give you the history of that because it's kind of the latest chapter in what's going on here. Now for faculty, mothers get 2 semesters for leave, fathers get 1 semester. Pre and part-time tenure track, emergency childcare, dependent care, medical insurance, stop the clock for 1 year childbirth, and help with trailing spouses. Theoretically, faculty do get all these things, but I noticed that I didn't hear that there was much help for trailing spouses. It's less than it should be. How do you create and sustain a family-friendly policy? Policies alone do not work. Make room for fathers. That's kind of the secret to it. It was not moving around at all until the dads started to take the policies up as well. All policies are entitlements, not requests, centrally funded if possible, which means that you don't have to request from your chair that you want to have time off or that you want to have emergency. They have to give it to you. Deans and chairs training and toolkit. We have a nice little toolkit which we developed, and every year when the deans and chairs have a retreat, they are supposed to go over that toolkit and realize what their obligations are in terms of pregnancy leaves, et cetera. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Well advertised and publicly posted explanation of benefits for all levels of scholars, including graduate students and postdocs. Again, I'm going to tell you about what's happening with graduate students now because we've had a big shift, very positive shift in that direction, and it's now getting posted. High-level administrator and a legal counsel responsible for advertising and enforcing the policies. Do we have that? We do?
The Title IX officer?
Yes, I think now we do have it. We didn't before. Title IX was not associated with pregnancy discrimination at all until 3 or 4 years ago. I'll tell you the story. Now this is Mark Brilliant, and he's a historian here on campus. And I didn't know him at all, but I was at a party for a good friend of mine in history, Paula Fass, who was retiring, and she took me over to him and said, "This is Mark Brilliant, you know, and he wrote about your policies." I said, "What?" And he had his book with, I think Paula had the book. This is at the beginning of his book, his acknowledgement. When Ezra Max Brilliant was born in August 2008, I was able to enjoy him as much as I did during his first year without risk. My career owes in good measure to the architects of the UC faculty family-friendly edge. They designed enlightened policies that children of all working parents should receive, as Edra did, and for which I'm forever grateful. Now, rarely do you get this kind of praise from anybody. And again, I'd never met him before, but that's how he felt and put it in the book, and I was really proud to see that. Now I'm going to talk a bit about Title IX. I had a law student who was working on the project, and she said, "Well, Marianne, what about Title IX and pregnancy discrimination?" And I said, "What about Title IX and pregnancy discrimination?" I didn't know that Title IX covered it at all. And I'm a law professor, and I was the dean. I should have known these things, but I didn't. And it actually does have a lot of regulations that specifically point to pregnancy discrimination. And it was, until recently, as I say, undiscovered. A recipient should not discriminate against any student or exclude any student from its education program or activity, including a class or an extracurricular activity on the basis of such student's pregnancy, childbirth, false pregnancy, termination of a pregnancy, or recovery therefrom. And that's true for any education program or activity. It includes employment and medical coverage. Did you know that Title IX was covered pregnancy discrimination? No. Still is unknown. It's going to be known more, though. Title IX compliance discrimination. We need a Title IX coordinator, and as you mentioned, that office has been beefed up greatly, not because of pregnancy, but because of sexual harassment, but it's gotten to be much stronger. A complaint procedure which follows very much the way of the current Title IX complaints. Dissemination of policy, which we are in the process of doing, and self-evaluation, so that you can tell the campus what you're really doing along this line. What does pregnancy discrimination look like? Once I got pregnant, I felt that my advisor no longer considered me a serious scientist. He gave me easy and not very important projects and spent much less time with me. Have any of you had that experience at all? No? That's good. About 1.5 years ago, I got an email from Sarah Hardy, who's a legislative aide in Sacramento. And she said, "Professor Mason, my boss, Susan Bonilla, from the Assemblywoman from Contra Costa, and myself are great fans of your work. We would like to help with pregnant graduate students. Can we help you?" So, of course, I've dumped all of our research. I just did a whole law review article and other articles on Title IX and pregnancy discrimination. And I went over to help them draft the bill. And then I went to Sacramento twice and gave testimony. And it was fascinating to go through that process because it's a crazy process. But nonetheless, it was signed by Jerry Brown now 1.5 years ago. So it is law in California that, among other things, and I don't have them written down here, but among other things, both mothers and fathers get 1 year of leave for childbirth if they want to take it, up to 1 year, without having to reapply and to be accommodated in their reapplication so they can catch up on courses and et cetera, et cetera. And the whole disability issue is part of Title IX. They have to be treated and their programs have to be given all the possible accommodations that they need. Now, we have 2 big websites that really cover all this stuff in great length. The first is toolsforchangeInstem.org, and that has a lot of videos on it, a lot of best practices, all kinds of really wonderful things. And then more recently, the Pregnant Scholar. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, thepregnanscholar.org. Has anyone seen it yet? No? You're going to love it. It's really quite good. It's about Title IX and pregnancy discrimination, and very well done. It's become a hot item on the internet. And that was part of our NSF. When they learned about this law in California, we already had an NSF grant, but they really insisted we take another one to be able to push it through the system and to be able to take it to Washington, which we did last fall. So this started a big movement to make sure that everyone knows about Title IX and pregnancy discrimination, and we make it a dissemination issue. So that will be happening. It is happening. This is the first, is that the pregnant scholars is part of it. And all of our UC systems now are giving, what I mentioned before, is up to a year's leave for graduate students and postdocs with accommodations when they want to return. The faculty have a year's leave that is for mothers, which is paid. This is unpaid for the graduate students, which is the only that's a bad part of it. And these are some of the topics we have in it. And then, of course, this book, Do Babies Matter? Gender and Family in the Ivory Tower. And this was done with Marianne Mason, Nick Wolfinger is a professor at Utah, and Mark Goulden, who is our local shining statistician and analyst. He does wonderful, wonderful work. Oh, no, this is my grandmother baby pictures. Basically, we surveyed all the faculty twice, once in the spring of 2003 and the second time in the spring of 2009. And between those 2 years, we had put in place all these family-friendly policies that we've been talking about. And as you can see, for mothers, in 2003, 73% of assistant professors had no children. But in 2009, only 36% had no children. So the number of babies born to assistant professors doubled during that period of time. And for men, it was 61%, and then it went down to 41%. So I call them my grandchildren. So it does make a difference. We did make a difference, and I think it will continue to go on in that direction. When you see the Pregnant Scholar website, you'll see there's a lot of really good arguments and case studies. Very well done.